I'm BushNinja. Welcome to my medicine blanket. Today I wanted to share with you my finest craft, something that's seen me through all of my journeys, and the original medicine for human skin. This is what our ancestors used to nourish the largest organ of our body, our skin. And I call it salve, and people make fun of me overseas when I say it that way. It's the kind of a South Florida American way to say salve. And salve or balm is a very simple thing to make. It has a very simple list of ingredients, but kind of like bread has a simple list of ingredients. Depending on how you combine them, you can make a lot of different kinds of things. So I usually offer this as like a large 3-hour-long artisan salve making for humans with skin. But I'm going to do my best to condense that down and be concise and put this into something that is interesting and quick and useful for you so that you can make your own amazing, nourishing skin medicine. Now, we've all been washing our hands a lot and sanitizing, and soap and alcohol, they dissolve oils and fats. And in fact, this thing that's going around has a fatty layer around it, and that's why the sterilizing components work the way that they do, but that's also why they dry out our skin and hands. This isn't just for that. I'm going to teach you how to make a broad spectrum medicine that's good for almost any kind of skin condition, because you can customize it to be for your needs. And so a little bit about myself. I'm BushNinja. I'm wearing my beautiful embroidered apron that my mom made me for Christmas. BushNinja Botanicals, and I learned how to make this stuff years ago at an Earth Skills gathering, an educational primitive skills festival, and the man that taught me how to make it, why I'm telling you this, is he was the retired Southeastern Regional Director for the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. And so he's a very strong Western medicine background, but he had to sneak this stuff into the hospitals because it's illegal, because it's not made by the pharmaceutical company, standardized, and yet the batch we made that first time and what we're gonna make today, it's pretty much food. The one we made was very simple, and I'm gonna talk a little bit more, and I like to make really complex things. If you look over here, I have all these incredible jars filled with all kinds of oils and fats, and you don't have to have all of those things. You can do it really quite simply. But it is really neat to infuse the medicine with. Our ancestors, they didn't have processed vegetable oil like we do. How's it pause?
No, it went back on due to poor connection.
We have a poor connection, so I'll do my best. My dad's being a great videographer here. Our ancestors, where they got their fat, their oils, was from animals. And of course, they were living with the land, and they learned from the animals. In fact, there were animals that they specifically called and were known to be medicine animals. And those were the animals that maybe taught the people what plants were medicine. And one of those animals is the bear. And so bear would teach people about different medicines, of course not using language, but they would just observe the bear. And the bear would go and maybe dig up a certain root after hibernating, and they pull out this one particular thing, and in fact today that's known as bear root or osha. And all the animals would eat the plants, and when you eat something, it goes into your body, and it goes in and it kind of follows one of two pathways. It's either going through your water or your oil. Things are either fat soluble or water soluble, and that's why you can have vitamin C is water soluble, and you can take all kinds of amounts of vitamin C, and if you can't take too much because you'll just pee it out. But other things like vitamins A, E, D, and K are all fat soluble, and you may know that you have to be careful about how much of those things you take, because they can accumulate in your body because they're stored in your fat. Now, all plants have both kinds of things in them, and some things are fat soluble and some things are water soluble. The one that's fat soluble that everybody kind of knows about is cannabis. And THC and CBD, they're fat soluble, and that's why you make ganja oil and ganja butter, and that's why it stays in your system for a month, and you can be tested for it if it's illegal where you're at. But with the animals, and just like the animals, because we're animals too, so if we're consuming those things, the medicine's carried in their fat. And so that's how our ancestors originally made this kind of product. They would take medicine animals, and I have here something very special. This is sacred bear fat from friends who live in a primitive skills community. This was actually essentially rescued from being in the garbage of hunters who had traveled through their land, and they have an arrangement that the hunters can pass through the land, but anything that they're not going to use, then the people collect. So this was ethically harvested and even essentially rescued medicine that my friends rendered, and then I traded them for this medicine. We're not going to use this today because a lot of my clients don't like to have animal products on them, but I just wanted to illustrate that to you because this is really powerful and ancestral stuff. But if you're not having an animal eat the medicine that goes into their fat, how do you get these plant medicines into the oil and onto your skin? Well, this is the key. If you don't watch any more of this talk, this is the one thing I want you to learn. It's very, very simple. This is the trick. You just put the plants in the oil. This is calendula in olive oil. Look at that color. It's beautiful. That color, you know what olive oil looks like. It's like this, but not quite as orange. And so all the phytochemicals, the plant chemicals that are in the calendula, that are fat soluble, have gone into the oil. And it's very similar. If you saw my other video on tincture making, it's the same kind of thing. It's just putting oils and plants together. Now, because we're not consuming this, it's not as important to worry about dosage and replicatability. Really, if you have some plant, and we'll talk more about kinds of plants you might use all throughout the talk, you just put them in the jar and cover them with oil. And just like the other day, it takes time and temperature and degree of exposure. So shaking it up, how long it's in the jar, and how warm it is. Now, here in South Florida, it's pretty warm right now, and I live in a van, and things get pretty warm in the van. So I use all my extractions happen pretty quickly where I'm at. But you want to wait about a month. And you can see I've had this in here for more than a month, but if you ever get to a point when you're using it that the oil comes down to the plant matter, that's the only way that it can ever really go off, because if the plant matter is exposed to the air, it can rot, it can get mold. And so you want to just be careful about that. But once they're in there about a month, you can strain them out, and that's pretty much the extraction. Now, you can do a one-in-one. This is calendula and olive oil, or you can make a whole blend. And now this is a pretty powerful mix I made here. And you can see it's dark in its color. You can see all the phytochemicals I've extracted. And there's a long list of medicine in here. It's got comfrey, yarrow, gotu-kola, chickweed, jewelweed, plantain, thyme, and chaparral in olive oil, grapeseed oil, and rapeseed oil. So I put these in here, and so you don't have to just do one-in-one. You can make your whole blend. You can say, I want a blend that's good for eczema and psoriasis and rashes, or I want a blend that's good for wounds and injuries and cuts and scratches and burns, or I want something that's good for my skin, for collagen formation. But the other neat thing about these things, and what I like to do, is just mix them all together, because they don't contraindicate. There's very few times when they're not going to play well together. And so comfrey was actually the first plant that inspired my whole passion for plant medicine, because of how powerfully it'll heal wounds. Yarrow is also very good for wounds. Gotu-kola helps the skin form collagen, so that's good for wrinkles and scar tissue formation. Chickweed for rashes and eczema. Jewelweed also for irritations. You may know it for poison ivy. Plantain, also again, rashes, irritations, and bug bites and stings. So this salve we're going to make is going to be good for bug bites as well. Thyme is super antimicrobial, a good kitchen spice that you'll probably have with you that you can put in your salve. Super duper antiseptic, really good for wounds. And even thyme essential oil and thyme steams, very good for the lungs, but we're going to focus on topicals. And chaparral, or the creosote bush, grows throughout the Southwest and is also good for old stagnant wounds that aren't healing, things that take a long time, also super antiseptic. So I'm not going to focus too much on all the different plants and things, or all the different oils we're going to talk about in a second, because I'm trying to be concise. But this is St. John's wort flowers in olive oil. And look at that beautiful red color. all of those compounds in there make it very good for burns and wounds of all sorts. So the thing I want you to take away, and what makes this product what we're gonna make, here's an example of some older stuff I had made. We're gonna make a fresh batch together. What makes this different from other commercial products, if you look at the ingredient label of, you know, something that's not, at least doesn't contain petroleum, we're just gonna throw petroleum products out because I say they're only fit for burning. You can light a fire with them if you're in a bind, but stay Burt's Bees. Now, nothing really wrong with Burt's Bees. It's normal oils and it's got beeswax in it, which we're also gonna add. But when you have Burt's Bees and other similar products that don't put plants in, it's like, the analogy I like to use is like you have a beautiful ornate box that in and of itself, it's decorative, it's lovely, it's got value. This is a nice little box, but it's an empty box. And so by putting plants into the oils, you're actually equipping it with the medicine properties of the oils, and you can carry them onto your skin and flesh. In fact, that's why they're called carrier oils. If you're familiar with essential oils, which we'll talk about in a bit too, you have to dilute them in a carrier oil. They were called carrier oils long before essential oils became popular, but because they were carrying these compounds onto your skin. If you're ever using essential oils, you want to make sure you put it into a carrier oil because they're the largest potential for harm in almost anything I've ever worked with is with essential oils. So they're extremely potent. I'm not going to tell you they don't work because that's not true. I'm almost going to tell you they're very, very strong, and so there's an educational component for using essential oils, and we won't go too much down that road. So the ingredients for salve, like I said, it's a very simple recipe. It's oils, any kind of oils. You can use olive oil. That first salve I ever made with that man, it was olive oil infused with comfrey, yarrow, and plantain. 3 of my big favorites. I use them in almost every batch I make. And then beeswax. So oils infused with plants that have medicinal properties, thickened with beeswax. And the beeswax makes it so that we're not just like getting all greasy and oily and rubbing liquid oil all over ourselves. The beeswax makes it solid. And so it's all about how much you put in and how much you combine the different things to make the texture that you want to have. And whenever you use beeswax, you don't want to buy beeswax on Amazon. You want to go meet your local beekeeper. This is one of the most important things I try to teach. Big part of my work is trying to create an economy for ethical beekeeping. And I'll debate with some, vegan folk who don't like to use bee products that by going to a beekeeper, your local beekeeper, they're the holiest people I've ever met. I've never met a beekeeper who isn't just fanatical about keeping his bees healthy and safe. But the only source of income they really have is honey. So buying wax from your local beekeeper puts your local medicines into your medicine and also helps support them, and we need to support the bees as much as possible. And you're gonna always want raw beeswax. It should have an incredible smell. You can't smell it, but you can stick your nose up to your phone and try. It's beautiful stuff. And it's going to be a lot better than those little pastilles that you get, those little droplets that you combine. Don't get bleached beeswax either, because you're just removing all the good medicine out of it, and you really want to support the right economies with your choices. So oils infused with plants, thickened with raw beeswax, with essential oils, if you choose to add them. Not necessary, mostly for scent. They do have their properties. So, great, that's kind of the basis of what we're gonna do, and then it just comes down to mixing it in the pot. Now, we're gonna look at some of these oils over here. They're all different, and I'm a kind of a nerd about it, and they all have different properties, and they're all differently good, I like to say. So don't fixate on, that one's got argan oil in it, and this one's got baobab oil, and there's some baobab oil, and there's some argan oil. And if you ever take my class, you're gonna get to touch all these things. And I like to say they're differently good. They have unique properties. Some of them are really powerful medicine on their own, like neem oil is one of my very favorites. But I don't have any neem oil, I ran out, so I can't even show it to you. But neem is like a pharmacy tree, and I'll tell you, it stinks. It stinks to high heaven. So usually in class, we all get to mix things here together. but I'm the only one that adds the neem because it'll throw the whole batch off in terms of scent. But it's incredibly useful for all kinds of things. But I've got moringa oil here. I've got raspberry seed oil. Look at that color. Raspberry seeds high in these antioxidants. It makes it really good for sunburns and all kinds of good stuff. Jojoba oil is another kind of unique one. Jojoba is a domestic American product that comes from northern Mexico, southern Texas. And it's actually not an oil. It's not a fat. It's a liquid wax. It's called a waxy ester that most closely resembles our skin's own natural secretion, which is called sebum. So I love adding jojoba oil to the mix because it really helps things pull through the skin. Your skin is built in layers. It's kind of like the soil. I like to use the analogy that your skin is very much like the soil, and it grows out in this layers. And you know the surface layer, it's dead. It's your epidermis has no living cells in it, and it protects the dermis layer, which is where the generative growth and the subdermal layers that grow up. And what happens as we get older is our skin, you've seen this in your elders, it becomes thin and becomes parchment-like and soft. And my dad's nodding his head even. He experiences this. And what happens is because your skin is like the soil and it's growing and it's growing and it's growing and you're eating nourishment into your body that goes through your system to feed it, what you can do, and what I like to call this stuff sometimes, maybe I'll create a branded product someday, but I like to call it flesh fertilizer. And it's flesh fertilizer because it's food for your skin. So one of the best ways you can nourish yourself is to put this stuff on. And one of the reasons I love making it is because I get it all over myself as I'm making it all the time, and it's going to give me long-term benefits, and I'm going to be a handsome old man. I mean, I got my dad here to say that I've already got the good genes, but I'm also going to help to nourish my skin as I grow. And it's always better to help, be preemptive on a problem than try to treat something later. So let's get down to it. Now, people always kind of wonder about the proportions, and it really doesn't matter. Like, I'm not going to give you a recipe. It's not about recipes because this is a geographic and seasonal product, meaning I'm in South Florida and it's hot right now, and like say I'm sending something to Miami and we're going into the summer. I'm going to make that product differently than if I'm sending it to my friends in northern Vermont and we're going into winter. I'm gonna, even if I make the same ingredient list, I'm gonna combine them in different proportions. And that's something I really love to do, is make custom medicines for you. So if you ever have a skin complaint or a problem or an issue, let me know and I can customize you a batch, not only for its medicine properties, but for its texture, for what you like. Sometimes people like to be able to scoop it out and really rub it on and make it creamy. Other times, they like it to be like firm and solid and in a stick form, and you can just draw it on wherever you're going. Different uses like tattoo salve. You want tattoo salves to be really soft so they don't pull on the skin as you're spreading it on the healing wound, which is the tattoo. And so to start you off with a basic ratio of beeswax to oil is it's about 1 to 4. 1 part beeswax to about 4 parts oil. So if I have a chunk of beeswax about this big, I can make a volume of salve about that big. I can just eyeball it in this, this way. Now, that's with olive oil. That's what that guy taught me how to do. 1 to 4, 1 to 5, maybe if you want it to be a little softer. But once we start adding all these different oils that I'm going to show you, that kind of goes out the window, because the oils, they have a spectrum of how hard they are, essentially what their freezing temperature is. Somebody told me once, and I really like this, oils are like liquid crystals. And so as they solidify, they crystallize and they form structures that, make them solid. So things that are very low in saturated fats, they don't freeze in the freezer. Grapeseed oil, almond oil, you can stick them in the freezer and they won't freeze. These are the light, thin oils that I like to use to make something. They're really penetrating. They're super nourishing as well. They're all nourishing, but these ones kind of go deep and they don't leave you that greasy feel. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are things that are solid. So this one, I wish you could smell this because it's got the best smell, and I usually make people guess what it is. but this is almost as hard as beeswax. This is the hardest one in my collection. And this is cacao butter. And this is the fat from the cacao seed. All of these lipids, all of these oils come from seeds. That's how the plants make fat, is it's always in the seed, and then they press the seed out. So say you've got hemp oil, and you know that's a big popular thing nowadays, you hear about it. So hemp seed oil is the hemp seed pressed for the oil that's within it, versus CBD or THC oil, which is an extraction that's made out of the plant of its different things. So when we're talking about these carrier oils, that we're talking about seed oils that have been pressed. Now this cacao butter, I can mark it with my nail because we're pretty warm here in Florida, but even on a cold day somewhere else, this is almost like beeswax hard. And so if I add more of this, it'll make my salve harder in its texture. If I add more of the jojoba or the grapeseed, it'll make it a lot softer, even if I add like the same amount. So it's kind of all about proportions. And so let's just go ahead and get started. Now, to do this stuff, you've made your extraction, you've got that going. You can do that in a jar for a month, like I said, or you can heat it up and do it, make the extraction happen much more quickly. One of the ways you can heat it up is using this. Now, I created a little double boiler here. Now, you don't want to just heat the oil. There's a couple reasons you don't want to just put oil in the pot and cook it. One is you can burn it. It can get really, really hot. Oils can get hundreds of degrees hotter than water. Now, water will boil at 100 degrees centigrade, depending on where you're watching from, or 212 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on where you're watching from. It's the same temperature, but that means that in a double boiler, the inside of this pot can never get hotter than boiling water will. And I don't even need it to be that hot. I just need it to be hot enough that everything melts in nicely. And so the first thing I'm just gonna start adding. I've got here, this is some creosote bush. I wish you could smell it. My favorite thing about it is it's the smell of the desert when it rains out west. If you've ever been in the Southwest when it rains, this is the smell of the whole desert when it rains. And I've got this jar, I'm gonna go ahead and use a bunch of it because I'm running low. And this is that example of if you've got, you don't want to leave the jars exposed to the air. So this is the last of this batch, and I'm going to just go ahead and let that drain in there as I talk about things. Now, usually how I love to do this is that my students get to add little bits all on their own, and then we adjust the texture at the end. I'm obviously going to have to do it all for you right now, and we're going to end up with a batch of oil that is a batch of oils in here, and then we're going to add the beeswax to it. So let's add some baobab oil. Baobab is one of the oldest human medicines. In fact, I call the fruit the OG superfood. It's the original superfood. We were eating baobab before homos were sapiens. This is stuff that humans had since the dawn of humanity. And it's really cool stuff. Now you'll notice not every one of my oils is infused. These ones, the kind of the fancy ones, they're more expensive. And so every time, if you note what I just did here, this was grapeseed oil and the creosote bush. There's still a bunch in there that's like sponged up into the plant matter. So I'm gonna later in another batch, I'm gonna squeeze that all out, and I'm gonna really try to get everything I can out of it, but I'm always gonna lose a little bit to the extraction, which is fine. But for my really expensive things, rather not do that, and let's just add them straight. If you want, you can blend your oils all together beforehand, and like I did in this big jar, and you can add that, and that's up to you. But I'm just gonna add some baobab oil here. Use that much of it. Now we're gonna add, oh, this is a new one I've been playing with recently that friends, I'm on a Facebook group called Lipid Lovers. I've used that word a few times, I should probably explain. Lipids are all of these things that are soluble in fat. All fats and oils are lipids, but not all lipids are fats and oils. For example, Waxes are also lipids. Those vitamins A, E, D, and K are lipids. Sterols, and cholesterol being one of the sterols. Now, people demonize cholesterol, but your cell walls are made out of cholesterol. You require cholesterol to create your own cells. So it's all about healthy balance. We've demonized fats and oils in today's culture. Had a lot to do with the sugar industry and other conspiracy stuff we don't need to get into, but healthy oils are good for you. And if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, it's even more critically important that you eat some kind of oil when you have your food, because your body cannot absorb those fat-soluble medicines unless they're carried by a carrier oil into your body. So you can eat a salad, but if you don't put olive oil or whatever kind you like onto it, you're not going to get all the nutrients. So it's very, very important to have healthy fats in your body every single day. They'll give you good energy as well. And so I'm going to use the last of this as olive oil and St. John's wort. So we've got St. John's wort. I should probably be writing these down, but I'll just stick them all to the side. I'll at least save a little bit left for another day. I'm going to just put them all here as I use them, and then I'll be able to record that later. Because remember, to label is divine. To quote my dear friend Mark Williams, you will definitely write nice labels out, because I have jars that labels have worn off of, and another time I'll make a super salve batch that'll be for donation. But right now we're going to have something that we know everything that's in it. So this is the one I started telling you about. This is Prakashi oil. It's got an X in it. Prakashi oil. And this comes from Brazil. Now, it's funny, on a cool day here, this is pretty solid. It's gloopy, so it's right in that middle line of saturated fat. Also, like coconut oil, most places in the country, it's solid at room temperature. In Florida, it's liquid at room temperature. Now, there's a couple oils I avoid. I'm just going to pour this Prakashi in there. Look at that. Now, this has got just the most divine texture. Again, they all have really good properties for the skin. They're all nourishing. They're all going to help with scar tissue. A lot of times it's the vitamin E, the tocopherol that goes into it that gives it that property. But, okay, so now we're going to add, let's see, I got some moringa oil. And so I don't worry about teaching you each of these things. You want to learn about each of these oils, just type it into Google and you'll learn all about how all of them are good. But I like to say that they're all differently good. And so I make, I had a professor, I make the super salve. I make this professor, I'm sorry, he told me, there's no silver bullet out there. It's a silver shotgun. So all these little bits are really the answer. So because they don't contraindicate, because they don't conflict, and there are a few times that you might make something different that's very specific, but for general skin health and wellness, like I make stuff for that goes out to the world, I just make it good for all kinds of things. And so you add them together and they're super salve. So it's got some argan oil. Now, the funny thing that happens is there's a lot of market economy. Argan was the newest rage that people got really popular into. Of course, it's been being used in Morocco since forever, but it became really popular, and it is really good for you. And a couple years ago, coconut oil, that was all the rage. Oh, but I started to say, I'm not going to put any coconut in here, because people are getting sensitive to coconut oil and more. And other oils that I don't use that are perfectly really good oils to use, but because I don't know who or what's touching my stuff, I avoid the nut oil. So like almond, I love almond oil, but I don't put it in my stuff because people have nut allergies. Avocado oil is also really nice. Mango oil is also really nice, and coconut oil. Those are generally, that's the four nut oils in general, the whole category of them. And all these other ones too that people might have a negative reaction to. Now, anybody can be allergic to anything, and say you happen to randomly be allergic to argan oil. You saw the amount I put in. Proportionally, it's quite small. So if you have an allergy to any one of these plants, so happens, it's unlikely to cause a reaction. So right now, I've just put in most of these non-infused, a couple of infused oils, but this one this one's really the medicine sauce. And I like to make strong medicine, like I said. So this has been extracting in there. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different plants in it. And so this is the one that's really gonna kick up the game in terms of the phytochemicals infused in, those plants that I'm gonna infuse in. And look at that color as I pour it in there. And I use this little sieve just so I don't get any big chunks. And that's gonna have, and I always add a much larger proportion of these kinds of things, the infused oil, because this is where the medicine is. This is the stuff that fills the box. This is why this kind of medicine isn't empty box medicine. And so much better than Burt's Bees. And I understand big commercial companies aren't gonna be messing with plants like this, and they just wanna add, mixtures, and that's probably why I'm reluctant to ever become a big commercial company. I like to be artisan, small batch style. This little pot's traveled the world with me. It's probably my most valuable possession, is just this little Boy Scout kit that my stepdad gave me that is vintage from when he was a kid. And so, you notice I haven't even turned on the heat yet, because I don't need anything to melt. Everything's already liquid. I'm only gonna turn on the heat when I need to melt something. And so, let's see, we'll add some of this jojoba oil. Now, I'm just doing it. I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times, and I'm gonna show you how to test it when we're done. So I know, even just kind of from looking at it, what's going in there, and it's all intuitive. Another one that's getting up to be all the rage is this marula oil. This was a gift from a dear friend in Mozambique. Marula oil, it's been hard for me sometimes to valueize my products, to know how much I should charge, because yeah, marula oil is really expensive, but I was given this in Mozambique and I carried it across the world. The first time I ever got baobab oil, I went to the factory in Malawi to find where they were making it and brought it back across the world. Didn't cost me very much in terms of money, but I also carried it in my backpack, a couple thousand miles. So this marula oil, it's got a whole list of properties on the back, really good, marketing information here, but I want you to know I'm gonna read you this list, and it applies to all of these oils. Call it little different, amounts or little scaling, bars. If you were to give this all a chart, but they're all gonna do this. They're all gonna be anti-aging, whatever that means, skin hydration, reduces stretch marks, sun damage reduction, heals burns and scars, safe during pregnancy because we're applying it to the outside of the body, nail and cuticle treatment, defrizz your hair. I always, whenever I wipe these things off, I always just put them in my hair. Everybody has a great hair day the day after class, and all kinds of things. And you can just use this, they'll sell you this as a serum straight, but you have to realize that we're gonna have it in our medicine, and it's gonna be all the better for having all of these different things. So we got marula oil, we've got calendula, and I'm making a pretty big batch here because I'm hoping you all will support, because I could definitely use the support, as we all could right now. And so I'm gonna be offering this at a better exchange than I usually am able to offer, because I've got nothing but time and a whole bunch of oils in my lap. And then what was this last one? Raspberry seed. So we got raspberry seed in there. Now, I'm getting to have a full pot here almost. And I've still got a couple more things to add. Now, I've got my 2 that are solid in Florida. This first one is shea butter. Now, butter, they use that word. It doesn't mean anything per se. It really just means that the oil is so saturated that it's solid at room temperature. That's what these butters mean. Now,
Back on.
all right, we're back. Thanks, Dad. Doing our best with the connection. So this shea butter, I can mark it easily, but it's solid here, and it's got to be 85 degrees right now or something. It's pretty warm. So these are the kinds of things that I just break them up a little bit and plop them in there. These thicker oils, I don't know, if you come to class someday, you'll be able to feel these. They're a lot more creamy feeling. They create a layer. They don't penetrate as much as those light oils, I call them, and they create a protection on the skin. A really nice time to apply these kinds of things is right after you get out of the shower. And what happens is, instead of using lotion, which is essentially salve plus water and air and whipped. But it can go off when you add water because it has everything life wants to grow in it. And that's what I want. I want medicine in and on my body that life will grow in when given the right conditions. But you don't have to add the water. You can just take your shower and then put these things on after you shower, and it'll help lock in the water and then nourish and hydrate your skin. So that's a good technique for application. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put a couple of spoonfuls of the shea butter in here. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of the cocoa butter, the cow butter. Now look how much harder this is, and it's almost brittle. See, it like crumbles? And now is the time for me to start heating up the batch. So I just turn on my little gas here and start the water getting warm. Now, a friend of mine in South Africa is a food scientist, and he taught me some really neat stuff one time. I always love giving my class because I always learn something in my class. And what he taught me that day was that all of these plant oils, these lipids that are in both extracting and in the seeds, they'll generally melt around 60 degrees centigrade. And so that you don't have to heat this thing up so that it's at a roiling boil so that it's at 100 degrees. And I don't have to have a thermometer to measure it. I just have to say like, oh, okay, it's on a little bit. It's got a little bit of bubbles. That's hot enough. Now there's 3 reasons we use these double boilers. The first reason is, like I said, we don't want to burn, you don't want to overheat the stuff. And one, that'll destroy some of the plant medicines that are in it. But also, like say a dog runs by or a baby kid runs by and they knock it over. If you've ever known a fry cook who's gotten a grease burns can burn you a heck of a lot worse than water will because they can be so much hotter. And so the one reason is to not damage the product. The other reason is safety. And then the third reason is that this water actually acts like a thermal battery. So it heats up and it stays warm, and the inside of the pot will stay warmer, and I don't have to keep heating it up if I'm like playing with things and testing texture and stuff like that. I can just let that, stay warm and then just turn the heat on whenever I need it. All right, now. So I'm gonna give you a couple of BushNinja tips, like I like to call them. These are things that you're not gonna find anywhere else because I made them up. And I'm probably not the only person that ever had this idea. I'm the only person that I've ever seen talk about them. But, there's nothing new under the sun. But there's 2 things that I figured out. And the first BushNinja tip was this. This is an irrigation syringe I had in my first aid kit. You can get them for free at the local pharmacy. And it's a 10 milliliter syringe. Doing a great job. These 10 milliliters is a good unit of measurement. And so I use this. I'll tell you, if you've ever had to fill little chapstick tubes with a spoon, it is very difficult not to make a mess. But this thing makes it all the easier in the world. And I also use it for my little stirry stick. Because why do you need multiple things? So I use this just to stir, but I'll just illustrate, I can just take some of that and then squeeze it into a container, when it's ready. It's not ready yet, obviously. And I can just decant it. So then trying to pour anything into anything. I've even seen these funny little, it's like a tray that goes on top of these balm containers that you...
Back.
We're back, okay. We pour it into and you spatula it around. It's just sloppy in general. And I can be very precise with this syringe. And so this is just gonna take a moment while this melts. And while that works, we're gonna add some more stuff. Now the next thing, and the next BushNinja tip is raise your hand if you've ever tried to chop beeswax before. Some of you are raising your hand. Probably most of you aren't. but I'll tell you, if you've ever tried to chop up beeswax before, it's very difficult. If you take a knife to this, it'll go in like this, and then it'll go kapow, and it'll just shatter because it almost like ice. This is a lipid, and it's frozen right now, and it has a crystalline structure, and it can just shatter, but it has this like delay, and then that's when you lose the tip of your finger into the product. And so a lot of people will use a cheese grater, but unless you've got a cheese grater from the 1950s, it's not made out of good steel anymore. These Chinese cheese graters or other kinds of cheese graters from around the world, they're made out of very flimsy metal, and I've actually seen cheese graters flatten out versus cold beeswax. And it's true. I've actually seen flat cheese graters from people using them, and they don't hold up. And then of course you get a little bit of your knuckles into the beeswax as well. So I figured out a really, really great way to chop up beeswax. These guys. Now, in America, we call them snippers or clippers or, rose snippers. It's funny, we love to use the action of the thing that it does. So these things snip, and that's a clip, and that's what they are. Other places in the world, they call them secateurs. Secateurs, which is a much more sophisticated way to say snipper or clipper. But I'll tell you, doesn't matter what you call it, it makes chopping beeswax a heck of a lot easier, and you can just scissor through it, and every time you cut, it creates an angle, and that's the next side that you cut, and you just keep cutting it like this, and any smallish size, if you've got a pretty big chunk of beeswax, you might have to break it with a different method. One time I met a really sweet, amazing old-timer, and she asked me to help her break up her beeswax, and I didn't have these things nearby, and she handed me a hammer and a chisel, and we put it on the ground with some newspaper and just hammered and chiseled until I broke it up. Now that was effective for large chunks, but I'll tell you, for small chunks, watch how quick this goes. Boom, boom, boom. Now you don't have to chop these up too small. It's a matter of, it's just gonna melt that much faster. I'm not doing any kind of extraction with this beeswax. It doesn't need to be very finely chopped, but it will go faster if I chop it up a little finer. And so this is another time when I let everybody in class, take turns while I'm talking, and they're chopping, and then they all get to add a little bit in themselves, and we all combine our energies. And that's a beautiful thing. Most of my products are made in educational settings, and that's nice because they're, both infused with the cool energies of the class and everybody that's in them. But it's also like, hey, I'm in class, I'm getting funded to make it, and then I get funded to sell it. So there's the business model for you. I've actually helped people create businesses all over my travels of doing these kinds of things, because it's really your ancestral heritage that's how to make this stuff. This is something we've all known how to do for a very, very long time. And so I'm adamant that I don't sell this information. You're all welcome to make a donation for watching this video. That'd be great. It helps me get by. If you want to do so, pretty much just search BushNinja on almost anything. I'm BushNinja Botanicals on PayPal. I'm BushNinja on Cashapp and on Venmo. And anybody, you can mail me a check too. I don't know. But if you want some of this product, we're going to offer it for sale for y'all, and I can even customize your own scents and essential oils and everything at the end. But this is going to be an amazing and elaborate batch that I'm creating. And so, like you see here, I'm not measuring. I don't really need to measure. 2 reasons I don't need to measure. One, that ratio of 1:4, 1:5, it's for olive oil. If you're just using olive oil, that's a great place to start. But once I start adding the cocoa butter and the jojoba oil and all these things that have different melting temperatures, it kind of throws that ratio out the window. And so what's a much more effective way is to test it. And so you want to, without having to let the whole batch cool down, that's kind of the key. I love what the afternoon light is doing, and you can really see the beautiful colors going through this stuff. This is an incredibly elaborate blend that we're creating right now. This is really not like anything that's commercially available. And so you want to let it all melt before you test it. But I'm going to show you the trick how to test it. And we're going to have to adjust it anyways. And it's almost all melted here. let's see here. It's getting a little rolling of the boil, so I don't want it to be that hot. So I'm just gonna turn that down a little bit. You just need a little bit of flame. You don't want it to bubble in. Now, what I have had happen before, I had this amazing thing happen one time, and I learned a valuable lesson at the same time. And then the one thing I thought I could do, I was in South Africa, I was at this esoteric healing convention, and I had this raw honeycomb. And I thought to myself, oh, maybe if I put the raw honeycomb into the batch, you know, that'll make it sweet for lip balm. Well, turns out the bees are smarter than I am. And the reason the bees are smarter than I am is that, you know, honey and wax don't mix because that's what they use to store the honey. So if they mixed, it wouldn't be a very good container. And so the neat thing about bees is all of their products, they contain each other. So on the inside of the hive, medicines, and it's not for this video, but if you know me, you know about propyl. Oh, and we're back. Is the honeycomb. Dad's doing a great job telling me. I hope the signal's coming through to you, but we're cutting in and out, and we're doing the best we can. The honeycomb holds the honey. Now, the honeycomb is made out of this wax, this lipid, and that's all fatty stuff. That's, you know, and as you know, oil and water don't mix, but if you've ever put honey in tea, you know the honey is water soluble. And so I put this honeycomb into the pot, and I melted it all down. I'm going to pause the story because I'm melted here. I'm going to continue that story because we're going to need to do it again. I just want to illustrate to you how to test it because this is more valuable than measuring. This test. So you just take a little bit out and you drip it on a plate. Any kind of plate will do. You can use a piece of cardboard, which is a little absorptive, so it gives a different thing. And if you notice, those drops, they start to turn solid. Now, I already knew that we had a lot more oil than beeswax in here, but I wanted to illustrate that to you. So this is something, if you just wanted it to turn a little bit solid and have it to be really kind of creamy, this would be like where you would, if it was going to a very cold environment, then you might keep it softer like this, because when it's colder, it's not going to be the same. So the first thing you do for the drip test is you take that little drop that's there and you try to just scrape it off the plate. First indication that I don't have enough beeswax is that this doesn't pop off in a nice solid bead. The next thing you're going to do is feel it between your fingers. See how long it takes to melt. And then the last thing is you're going to use your most sensitive sensing part of your body, which is your lips. And you just put some on your lips and you can really feel what it's going to feel like when you do that. So I knew we needed some more beeswax anyways, but I wanted to show you that first because now you'll add a fair bit more. So back to the story. Yeah, turn that down a little bit. These stoves, you got to be real careful. You don't want it to go out on you. Okay, we good? So I put that honeycomb into the pot, and you know, it had everything in it that the bees liked. And so it was funny. I was outside at this event, and there was a guy making juice. He had all kinds of fruit cut up and everything, and he had already called all the bees. Thrill out of sharing the knowledge and the information. And so as one does, you know, I'm in it, I'm landed on my foot, and I like, oh, it's all good. You know, I never like wash the stuff off. I never throw it away because it's really good medicine for you. So I just put it all over my body. Thankfully that day I hadn't put it all over my face because I was talking to customers and I didn't want to be like really shiny faced or anything. Well, because I'd put the honeycomb in there, the bees had everything they wanted, and they descended upon me and my friend and this other guy that was there, and we were covered in hundreds of bees. Literally covered by bees. Like, I couldn't hardly move because there were hundreds of bees landing on our skin and kissing the medicine off of our flesh. How cool is that? And I learned that the African honeybee has a bright red proboscis because these little ladies were just like crawling all over between my hands, and we're trying to do our work. That random guy, he just couldn't hardly deal. And obviously we all knew that, swatting the bees was not a good idea, and that nobody was getting stung. It was amazing. It was actually one of the most powerful experiences of my life. And I looked down at my foot that had a big dollop drop down on it. It was completely gone because it was so covered in bees. I couldn't see my foot, how many bees there were upon me. And that guy that was the random guy, he just sat there and he meditated while we were getting kissed by bees. Oh, there we go. And that was really amazing. So unfortunately, you can't just add honey to your salve to make it sweet. It doesn't work that way. And it never really did combine, and it kind of separated out anyways. But the other thing that happened, the reason I started telling this story, was that I was a little bit distracted while that was happening. It was a little difficult to concentrate, and the pot started to boil. And because this is not a proper double boiler, what happened was a little bit of water went in, and I didn't realize it. And of course, it actually also had some honey in it too, so it was like honey water. And later, I went ahead and I'd sold my products, and I had a little bit left over, and I opened it up, and it was neat because it looked totally normal, but when I poked it, it had a cavity on the inside that was filled with honey water. And that honey water, unfortunately, made the product go moldy, which is, like I said, it's got everything life wants to thrive. I want that. That's good stuff. And granted, it's just, you don't want to get water in it. That's the point of the story. I felt really bad. I sent a message out being mortified that I'd created an inferior product. Of course, the product was fine, especially if you just drain the water out, because, like I said, the oil and the water don't mix. And nobody was as upset about it as I was. But I did have this one jar that I didn't use for all that time. And then later when I opened it, it had gone moldy. And what I used it for was where I was staying on a farm, there was a dog that had gotten injured, and he had run through some barbed wire and gotten stuck on the barbed wire, and he had just completely flayed the skin off of the inside of his leg. It was a patch of skin about that big that was just raw, ripped off, completely flayed of his skin. And unfortunately, the farm, there were farmers, there was a farm dog. They weren't as much of fanatical animal lovers like a lot of Americans are. And people just, the dog is a dog, and he'll heal. No dog pun intended. But so what I did is I used that batch that I wasn't going to sell it off to anybody or anything like that, and I just put it all over that dog, and he seemed really grateful, and I think it really helped him. So it was definitely still valuable medicine, and it didn't cause it to be in any way toxic, because again, we're not eating it. You could eat it. It's the normal stuff. It's safe to eat, but I'm not advising that you do. But yeah, that was what happened the one time I had gotten some water in it. Now, if you look here down in the pot, you can see, maybe if you can notice, that it's gotten a little bit thicker as I stir it. This is one of the ways that my intuition and my experience tells me that we're getting closer to the texture we want to have. And I can actually see it as I stir it. So I'm just gonna clear my plate, make sure I got all my other stuff off, and I'm gonna show you again the test. Now, we've got a full pot here, and I was anticipating using most of this block of beeswax, but we're gonna now see the difference when we drip it on there, and it only takes seconds. You see that? It only takes seconds, and I don't have to let this whole batch cool down. So sometimes you'll see videos and stuff where they talk about putting it into the container and putting the container in the fridge, and then that'll let it solidify quickly. But then you got to take it out of the fridge because it's no longer at ambient room temperature, so it's going to throw off your texture. And then you got to let it warm back up to room temperature, and this is this whole rigmarole you got to do that you really don't have to do. Just turn that down a little bit. Now, so let's go over the test practice again. So we take the bead. Oh, look, it pops right off now. That's nice and solid. I rub it between my fingers just to see how it feels, how it melts. I put it against my lips. Oh yeah, that's much better. And what can happen if you're a bearded man like myself is you'll end up with little bits of stuff all up in your beard. So I always go like this. And when I'm done, and hey, this stuff can be used for beard balm. This can be used for hair oil. The only thing is, you don't need the plants in it if you're just putting it on your hair. So when I make hair oil, I don't put as many medicine plants into that product, which is nice because I'm able to sell it for a little bit less, and it's a little more affordable for people who just want to put it in their hair, for example. I think we're gonna need just a little bit more beeswax in this mix. And then we are almost done with the basic salve making. Like I said, it's just oils, plants, and beeswax, and that's that. Now, the last thing that you can add, there's one more thing I'm not gonna get into, which is how to add bee propolis and other things, but that's gonna be, if you come to the long class, we'll do that one. The last thing you can add is essential oils. So I've got some essential oils here. I've actually got a bunch of essential oils that I've been very graciously gifted and donated over the years. So if you want a batch for yourself, you can comment on this video and we can make you your own batch. You can contact me directly and I can customize a batch for you. I actually invested in some Palo Santo essential oil, which has the most divine smell. It really is incredible. It smells just like the wood. And of course, I sought out ethically harvested Palo Santo oil. And while this lasts a little bit, I'm just gonna chop a little bit more beeswax into here. And we're almost done. Now, say I ran out of beeswax and I wanted to make it a little bit thicker still, you can add that cocoa butter. That's another really good one. You don't need the beeswax. Now, folks who don't want to use bee products, there are other plant-based waxes you can use. But in my opinion, nothing is superior than raw beeswax from your local beekeeper. And like I said, we're creating an economy for ethical beekeeping. So we really want to help these guys out, these people, guys and gals, all kinds of beekeepers out there. In fact, I think of my personal friends who are beekeepers, more of them are gals than guys, and God bless all of them. And they and all the bees are, you know, doing all the work. They're all the ladies anyways too, so we've got to give props to the ladies. And this cacao, you don't have to add the beeswax. You can just use cacao. You can use candelia wax. You can use soy wax, which is hydrogenated soy oil, so industrial, not as good in my opinion. So that's kind of an example of, like, you know, I call my products vegan friendly. So these are vegan friendly products, meaning that they're supporting those ethical beekeepers and that this is actually helping those people and the bees. Now, if you had only an option to buy beeswax off of Amazon in little bleached pastilles, then yeah, okay, I guess it's not that much different from using hydrogenated soy wax, but I like to keep it natural.
You got a little more than a minute remaining.
Okay. So the last step, I've only got a minute remaining. The last step is to take your container that you're gonna add it to, take your essential oil, put it into the jar, not the pot. You don't wanna add the essential oil to the pot. You wanna just put it in the jar, about 4 or 5 drops per 10 milliliters. There's 30 milliliters in an ounce. This is a 2. Okay. Well, for my first live class, I think that went pretty well. We made it almost pretty much all the way to the end, and for those of you who want to learn how to make the stuff, then you can go back and watch it. But we've got it all pretty much made right here now. That's salve that we made just in a moment ago over the last hour, and I wrote an ingredient list for you here. And so this salve contains argan oil, baobab, cacao, grapeseed, olive, raspberry seed, pracashi, jojoba, marula, moringa, shea butter, rapeseed. And those oils are infused with the plants that have medicinal properties: calendula, comfrey, chickweed, plantain, jewelweed, thyme, chaparral, St. John's wort, of course, plus raw beeswax to thicken it, and essential oils if you want them. So that's the stuff, guys. That's my finest craft, and that's how I make it. And there's just one last step. So after you've made it up and you've got it all in the pot like this, the next step, the last step, is to put it into the jar. And I'm gonna use some Palo Santo essential oil that I got, and 'cause I just love the smell of it. But I have a whole plethora of different oils. So if you have a desire or a scent, I can make it custom for you. And like I said, so it's about 5 drops per 10 milliliters, which is 1 squirt of that 10 milliliter syringe. This is a 2-ounce jar, and that's what I've got for everybody. It's 2-ounce jars, so that's 3 squirts per ounce. So it's 30 milliliters per ounce, and this is a 2-ounce jar. So I'm gonna put 6 squirts in there, and if it's 5 drops per squirt, I'm gonna put 30 squirts. It's that simple, but it's important for essential oils to dose them well, because like I said, the only problems I've ever seen people have is burns and things and topical rashes from misuse of essential oils. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Now, of course, it doesn't matter if a couple of extra drops get out of the way there. That's all well and good. So that's what you do. And then, let's see if I can just do this nicely using my selfie stick action. The trick is with the syringe, give it a few pumps just to make sure that it's nice and melted. And then each full, I don't actually have to measure this, but if you use a full pull, that's about 10 milliliters. And so it should take about 6 squirts. Now you want to squirt it in there with a little bit of force, because you're mixing it all together. And at this point, there's a little bit of a speed concern, because you don't want it to solidify on you before it all mixes. All right, boom. 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 There it is. And so then that just solidifies, and you'll have, in a few moments, the most incredibly amazing skin salve that, again, has all of these ingredients in it. And if you missed that, you can just go back to my last video. It was a long one, and you can watch how we made it. But if you would like to have some of this, it is for sale, and I would love to sell it to you. And I'm certainly offering, if you just need some and you need to make a plan, it's pretty much donation based. But my standard is $1 per milliliter, but I'm not going to charge that right now. One, because we all are in a bind right now, and both I need the support and I feel like you need the medicine. And so I'm offering it, for shipping, plus, we can chat. I would say that I would do a 2-ounce jar for $25 plus $5 shipping. That's pretty much half off. So if you can afford that, that would be great. If you can't, let's make a plan. I'll also take exchange for services and all the other things that I normally do. If you liked my videos, feel free to make a donation. Feel free to leave a tip. BushNinja, that's my name. And so you can type that into Venmo or Cashapp, and I'll pop up, and BushNinja Botanicals at Gmail. and that's how you find me. And before I sign off, I just want to show you one of my local friends. This is a gopher tortoise. He lives around my house. He's a protected and endangered species, a critically endangered and climax species. He's a fatty. Wow, he's a good tortoise. And it's funny, we have tortoises and hares growing here, living here on our land. And back over there where I keep my medicine blanket, there's my house. That's my van. That's my blanket space. And back there in the bushes is where the turtle lives. Tortoises, not turtles, they're tortoises. So, hope you all liked learning about that, and glad that I was able to record it for y'all, and glad to see you, Nicole, being the only person watching. I love you, babe. And everybody have a great day, and hope you all stay well and healthy, and I love you. Take care.